Civil officers are brief. Now I say depends.
So we'll go ahead, we'll have you do an intro and then I'll go ahead and jump into it. So if you don't mind.
Don't mind at all. Hello, everyone. Mac Long, Director, Montana Department of Transportation. Honored to be here. It's fun kicking off this exciting chapter of what we get to add to our toolbox. That I have the pleasure of meeting with the governor every month. And this is one of the issues he asked me about again today was our goal was to hit 20%. We hit it this year, which he was grateful of. And he said, are you going to double it next year? And I said, we'll try, sir. We're going to do it. And he said, does the department like alternative contracting? I said, we like old contracting. We're builders. Give us a chance to build. We will build. So this is wonderful. It's another tool in the toolbox, and we do love alternative contracting. And it's a wonderful way for us and the contractors and the consultants and everybody to work together in true partnership fashion. So with that, that's probably more introduction than you wanted, John, but
No, that's good. I appreciate
I
it.
appreciate the chance to say thank you, and from the governor on down, he appreciates what we do too.
Well, thank you very much, Director Long. Yeah, you and your staff and all of engineering, the second deck, we call it, have supported us, and we appreciate that. But I do want to thank everybody for being here, either logging in or being here presently. We are going to present from this location, sitting, and we have one person in Alaska, Anchorage. Steve Noble will be presenting remotely. So this is a progressive design build workshop, as you can tell. And this is part of a process or a program that we want to use to educate consultants and contractors, because this is a team effort, this program. And we've reached out to ACEC. We've actually had them help us put together our guidance doc or provide input on our guidance doc. And MCA has actually had input as well. So it's a collaboration of essentially those three entities, us, ACEC, and MCA. And we're here to present our newest project delivery program. So let's go ahead. And so first off, a little bit of housekeeping. If you mute your phones or microphone, that'd be great. We would like to hold Q&A till after the presentation. If you could list your presentation or your questions in the chat box, that would be great. Raise your hand if you, I think we're actually going to forego verbal questions unless something's really burning that you would like to ask clarification on, but we would ask if you could hold till the end. This meeting is being recorded for future reference. We'll be posting it on our alternative contracting website, web link. And also we will have the presentation, this PowerPoint presentation available as well. And then finally, for those who want PDHs, we will grant an hour and a half or an hour PDH through, you just need to make a request, and with Ellen Hinshaw, you can write that down. Go ahead and make it to Ellen and she'll go ahead and distribute those. So presenting today are myself and Brandon Graff from MDT, and Steve Noble and Cody Salo from Dowell. Interestingly, in my picture, I'm smoking a cigar and I'm petting my dog. Steve's got his dogs there. Brandon just got a deer, and Cody just, I don't know what you're doing. So you're up on the hill somewhere. So anyway, so myself, a little bit of background real quickly, 38 years in the consulting industry, wore many hats, from city engineer, water, wastewater, you name it. But I've been heavily involved since 1997 with MDT design bid build projects, and since 2004 on MDT's design build program. Past 5 years, I've been managing the alternative delivery program. Joining me, I do want to put a shout out to my incredible staff, Brandon Graff, Ellen Hanshaw, Clancy Williams, and our fabulous leader, Darren Reynolds. So Brandon Graff, he's worked as a consultant with MDT for 3 years as a consultant on highway and bridge projects, and he's been with MDT Alternative Contracting since 2009. He manages multiple design, build, and CMDC projects. He's also an elk slayer master. So, Steve Noble, from Dowell, he leads the Dowell Innovation Delivery, Innovative Delivery Market Sector, focusing on design build, progressive design build, CMDC projects, and program management. He has 27 years of experience working as a consultant, primarily on DOT and federal projects ranging from PEL studies to complicated multi-phase alternative delivery projects. He is involved, actually, he's part of our alternative contracting general engineering consultant consulting firm, Dowell, DJ&A Garber. He is the subject matter expert and principal. Cody Salo, the last of our speakers, he leads Dowell's transportation planning and design marketing sector and brings 18 years of consulting experience with various DOTs. His initial involvement with MDT Alternative Contracting began in 2007, and he has been involved with numerous MDT design build projects and CMDC projects, including the current Montana 200 Lewistown Bridges project. He's contract manager for Dowell's ACGEC team and will be involved with many of the upcoming projects. Let's see, why are we here? We're here because we want to provide contractors, consultants, and MDT staff information on our newest delivery program. We're going to provide quite an extensive overview on the basic elements of progressive design build. We're going to share tips. These are tips from lessons learned that we're going to share with you. So you don't either you do things the right way or you don't make the mistakes we've seen. We're going to try to help you with that. And then we're going to outline the key elements of the guidance doc, which isn't out yet. It will be out soon. We're finishing up some final touches. We're going to get it approved by Federal Highways, and then we will post that on our website. The outline today, real quickly, we're going to talk about fundamentals of alternative contracting, including progressive design build, alternative contracting methods, selection, project selection, delivery and selection process, how we select our projects, alternative delivery, and let's see, PDB procurement process, how we procure contractor consultants teams, elements of a good statement of qualification, proposal, and interview, roles and responsibilities of you and us, design decision-making process, hugely important to our program for its success, of risk identification and management, cost estimating and reconciliation, including the ICE, and progressive design build guidance document summary, and then finally, the future of alternative contracting delivery. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Steve. And Steve, go ahead and take it away and just let me know when the slide turned.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here today with you all, and appreciate the opportunity to both participate as well as listen in. And John asked me today to talk a little bit about the fundamentals and to lay a little bit of the groundwork for different types of contracting and how PDB is different than maybe what we have traditionally done or what the industry has traditionally done. So next slide, please. We're going to start out. I mean, this is just really, not knowing the background of everybody in the room. I'm just trying to get us all to the same level of information and understanding about progressive design build and how it's structured and maybe some of the advantages of the various models. And so just we'll cover all the various models real quickly here, starting with traditionally what most of us grew up with and what is still dominant in the profession is the design bid build process. With the kind of the typical structure where the owner hires a designer, they have a separate contract with the contractor. The design build, kind of the risk profile of the design bid build process is generally seen as being low for the contractor and higher risk for the owner. I'll put a caveat here, which applies to all of the slides that I'm going to show, which is that what I'm going to talk about today are general kind of rules and perceptions in the industry There are always going to be exceptions. There are always project-specific considerations that might make the risk profile slightly different based on the specific project characteristics or the team characteristics. But this is a high-level kind of generic or general overview of those things. So, next slide. The design bid build process, it's a very linear process. The federal process for these types of projects is generally very linear. You hire the consultants, you do your environmental and your design process, and that has a linear progression to it as well. And then those things have to be done. You get authority to proceed, you bid, and then you are able to move forward with the building phase of the project. And the durations of those various tasks obviously vary based on the project specifics. Next slide. So CMGC, which Montana's got some experience with Johnson Interchange and some. I know there's one or two other projects at least that have been using CMGC, and in this type of structure, it's a very similar structure to traditional design bid build. The owner has a contract with the designer of record, and they have a separate contract with a CMGC contractor, and those and really this is a effort to get that contractor's involvement and feedback on the means and methods of how the project would be constructed, try to get that earlier in the process, and is generally viewed as a way that balances the risk profile between the owner and the contractor. And but it is separate contracts chosen for, or so the designer is chosen under a separate process from the CM. Next slide. From a timing perspective, still a little bit of a linear process, but it does allow the contractor to get involved earlier. You can see here that the build phase overlaps with the design phase, and the hiring of the construction manager that occurs at varying phases during the design phase, depending on the project specifics. Next slide. So then moving on to the design build and the variations of design build. So traditional design build and progressive design build, they have the same general structure where the owner hires a design builder. So the contractor, under this scenario, the contractor is typically the prime with a consultant as a sub to the contractor, and together they make up the design builder. And this type of structure in general has some of the same similar characteristics as the CMGC, particularly for the PDB profile, but they do have different risk profiles. And in general, progressive design build, or let's start with the design build. On the design build side of things, the design build generally is usually lower risk for the owner. The owner will put together that upfront kind of project specific criteria, and then the design builder teams come in with proposals with generally their fixed price, and the contractor and the owner puts a lot of that onus on getting this project built, relies heavily on those upfront project documents to prescribe what the project needs to look like and how it needs to perform, and that puts a lot more risk on the contractor, and so it's generally seen as the higher end of the spectrum for the contractor, whereas PDB a little bit more balanced, maybe not as generally kind of even between the CM and as the CMGC, where it kind of sees them both right there in the center, but generally but PDB generally is lower risk for the owner than for the contractor, because at some point, typically in the PDB process, it does proceed as a fixed price project through to completion, which puts a little bit more risk on the contractor. Next slide. So if you compare the timelines of the two, you can see traditional versus the progressive. Typically, the traditional does take a little bit longer to prepare or to get through the process, because you have that upfront phase of setting the criteria, the phase ones or the environmental phase, the geotech, a lot of those tasks get done in that early upfront criteria, and the contractor and the designer get chosen through a bid process after that initial criteria is set, whereas the progressive design build goes straight into selecting that design build, the design builder, and really is seen as the fastest way to get to construction of the four methods. Next slide. So if you look at the schedule comparison of the four, as I said, progressive design build generally seen from a relative perspective, it's generally seen as the shortest, quickest process to construction, and design bid build is generally seen as the longest process to get to construction. But traditional design build also gives you, also has its advantages, and is usually not too far behind a progressive design build approach. But progressive design, if you're really looking to start construction early, usually PDB or CMGC are your faster methods to actually start work. Next slide. So real quickly, just a kind of an advantages summary, and you'll notice there's no disadvantages. That's because most of the disadvantages are just the opposite of our advantages here. So we'll talk about what are the advantages of the various different structures. Again, high level, there's always exceptions to these, but from a high level perspective, here's some of the how these different alternative methods are viewed. So beginning at the left side of the page here with a traditional design bid build process, there's a lot of industry familiarity with that process. Still dominates the market in most geographies. There are exceptions, but in general, most, particularly, particularly in smaller, in different types of jurisdictions, that low price method selection is typically the most familiar. The owner has a lot of control over the design. They don't put the project out for bid until they have a lot of confidence in how that's going to look and how it's going to be completed and what that finished project's going to look like. And from a operations perspective, it's a very legally proven. The permitting agencies understand it. The public very familiar with it, and a lot of acceptance over the fact that they're getting a low price contractor selection. Which may not end up being the lowest price process, but at least at bid day, it's viewed as being the low price option. Then CMGC, as we move into the CMGC process, the owner starts to take a little bit more control of the contractor and the design team selection. In the CMGC, the owner actually has those two separate contracts, as we said, where if you compare that with PDB or design build, which has a single entity responsibility, the contractors choosing who they're going to team up with. And this is very analogous. I like to use the analogy that under CMGC, the contractor has a contract with the designer, and then they separately hire a contractor, and then they have a shotgun wedding and tell them to go make a baby. Whereas in the other two cases, the contractor and the designer have chosen to be together, typically viewed as having a better cultural fit, but for the design team, maybe take some of that risk out of it for the owner, that the team dynamics and chemistry might not fit together as well. CMGC, very transparent cost accounting, as with some of the other alternative delivery. Often the equipment and subs are bid competitively. That's the case in PDB as well. That helps to from a local perspective, that should help to spread the work around a little bit, and also maintain some of that low price competition. CMGC is a faster delivery time than design bid build. There's a lot of CMGC gets that early discussion, mitigation of the risks, and maintains that off ramp to go traditional design bid build throughout the process, all the way through. That maintains that off ramp throughout, maintains a good negotiating position for the owner as long as it's done in a fair way. Jumping over to design build and progressive design build. we're here to talk about PDB today, so that's why it's highlighted, but you can see kind of some of the advantages between a design build versus progressive design build. And we've covered a lot of these advantages in the previous discussion, but moving down to the bottom there, the progressive design build and design build, as John pointed out during our early discussions, they have the added advantage that from a MDT's perspective, they can obligate the project funds earliest of these types of projects. So if they're really looking to get out for construction quickly and get things obligated early, PDB has those advantages and maintains that fast schedule and has a single entity responsible, a single entity that is really chosen to be together and then are selected based on their quals and a combination of quals and price. Next slide. With that, I'll turn it back over to who's next.
John. So let's real quickly, I'm going to cover the project delivery selection process. We have an established process to select between, actually we consider design build, CMGC, and progressive design build. So we have criteria that we've established. We essentially set this up actually with our pilot program for CMGC. We have a workshop with key stakeholders. Those people will usually include the senior functional managers, like if it's a bridge project, if it's a geotech heavy project, we'll bring those people in. They'll be senior level, usually bureau chiefs and above. We'll bring in the funding managers as well. And then of course we basically manage the process. We do have 6 criteria that we look at: opportunity to manage risk, schedule impacts, cost impacts, project complexity, opportunity for innovation, and we just added complexity of coordination, especially when we're dealing with third-party participants. Case in point might be our Polk Creek Hill project, so where we consider working with tribal government. There are things that we look at when we look at projects. They might appear early enough to be good candidates, but if they're meat and potato projects, lots of times we'll just say, let's just go the design build route. I mean, it's just not the type of project that we think fits the alternative delivery process. We do, when we're done, we'll make a recommendation to our pre-construction and construction engineers, and they will forward a recommendation to the commission. We do need commission approval for these projects by state law. And like I say, it applies to all alternative delivery projects. And then we just adopted recently a process where we pre-screen projects going to consultant selection to determine if they are candidates for alternative delivery. Typical projects. So what I think of as far as progressive design build, it's sort of that sweet spot between CMGC and design build. We basically reserve design build for, as we move forward, probably the simpler projects that don't require a lot of labor from either from basically our staff. And CMGC is probably reserved for a big, ugly, hairy projects that have all kinds of environmental concerns, geotech concerns, you name it. So typical projects for progressive design build: flood mitigation, emergency bridge replacement. This happens to be Denton Bridge, which went design build, but it was operated or managed similar to a progressive design build format. Major slide repairs, especially ones that we need to act on very quickly. And then finally, I say moving forward, you're going to see a lot of our grid bundling projects going progressive. There's a reason why we want to do that. It just seems to make a lot of sense to have the contractor and the engineer working together to come up with the solutions and working with MDT. So I'll turn it over now to Brandon Graff, who will present on progressive design build procurement process.
Thanks, John. Excuse me. So really, we're going to be talking about how we get the firm on board, and that's the design build firm, the progressive design build firm. We call it a two-phase process, and that's usually the request for qualifications, something that MDT issues. That's a public advertisement that's going to go on our Q&A forum. And even prior to this, we should have the project, whatever project's going to go, progressive design build, or any alternative delivery method up on our alternative contracting webpage for several months in advance, kind of hinting at when the RFQ is going to be released for the public. And then after we shortlist, we would then issue a request for proposal. But really within this two-phase process, there's 4 deliverables from the firm. And really I put deliverables in quotation just because the interview isn't you guys delivering, isn't the firm delivering us a document or piece of paper. It's a in-person interview that really doesn't produce a formal deliverable. So I'm going to walk through kind of the contents of each of these 4 deliverables from the firm. So the statement of qualifications, and I'm going to touch or hit these pretty quickly. John's going to go into this after me about the good elements or good elements to a good SOQ type proposal and interview. So staffing and coordination plan, we're looking for who you guys are going to staff for the project, and then also the experience that you guys have as a team or individually between the consultant and the contractor. And then the project approach is going to be an optional section. We may ask for it, we may not ask for it. But really, we're looking for a team to partner with on the project to get it completed. One thing to note going up to the staffing and coordination plan, this is something that we've been carrying over from the SOQ into the technical proposal score. So this is really important to pay attention to because it is going to potentially weigh into your best value score at the end of the day. So now on to the technical proposal. Again, that staffing coordination plan is very likely going to carry over and be worth some weight in your technical score. Strategic project approach, we're asking for a pre-construction phase approach as well as a construction phase approach. Approach to design build deliver or progressive design build delivery process. So how well your team's going to collaborate with MDT, what your risk management process is going to be, kind of describing some of the potential project risks that you see early on, and then decision analysis and resolution. And then finally, the last piece is going to be project innovations and resources, which you're going to potentially share some of your innovations for the project in that section, as well as unique resources and capabilities. In the interview, the interview is going to be described in the RFP, so that along with the cost proposal, both of those are going to be described in the RFP. So there's nothing that MDT produces after the RFP is developed that's going to be describing that more. So we're going to be asking project-specific questions, how well you know the project, and then delivery method-related questions. And some of the questions that could be delivery method questions, you don't necessarily have to have progressive design build experience to know them. They might be questions related to, if we have a big difference between the firm and the ICE, if there's, a 15% difference, how is your team going to, be able to identify where the differences are and come to resolution and price agreement with the ICE? And then the weighting of the interview is going to be governed by the administrative rules of Montana. And that is 18.4.201. And really the section that we're looking at for the weighting of the interview is the section that's highlighted here. The department must weight the in-person interview of each shortlisted proposer as at least half of the technical score. So at a minimum, we can weight this section at 50%. And I believe on this first project, we might be weighting it at 75% or potentially 33% or 2/3 of the total technical score. And then on the cost proposal, again, this is going to be described in the RFP of how to submit and when to submit your cost proposal. By law, MDT must consider project costs when awarding the project. One challenge with this is when we are hiring a firm, we've got very limited information on the project. So we want to hire them as early as we can in the process. So we've got very limited design information available at the time of the RFP. And so what we ask for when we don't have a lot of information on the project up front is a construction phase multiplier, similar to CMGC. If anybody's looked at our RFQ, RFPs for CMGC projects, you'll see construction phase multiplier in there. And it's a multiplier that includes profit and then home office and overhead or G&A allocated to the project. One thing to note here, weighting of the cost proposal and the best value score must be approved by the Transportation Commission before we issue the RFQ, RFP. And then again, on the cost proposal, one thing I'd like to highlight that has changed from our CMGC pilot projects is we did use the closest to the average calculation on that project or for our first 4 pilot projects. And one of the main reasons that we changed our calculation for the cost proposal is that if we get 2 proposers or 2 bidders on the closest to the average, they essentially cancel each other out. And so there's nothing keeping the 2 firms from just bidding the maximum because the scores will average out and they'll get the same amount of points for their cost proposal. And so what we're going to be doing with progressive design build is it's going to be based on an interpolation between a high and a low limit of multipliers. So the low limit, for example, might be 10%. The high limit might be 20%. And so if a contractor bids or a firm bids 10%, they're going to get the max number of points for that section. If they bid 20% multiplier, they get 0 points for that section. And again, we're going to be discussing this further on as we advertise our first PDB project, but the calculation is going to be very clear in the RFP. And kind of recapping the process, the 2-phase process and everything that goes into that. We issue an RFQ. The firm preps the statement of qualifications, submits it to MDT, and then a group of technical review committee members ranks the firms, scores the proposals, ranks the firms, and develops a short list. And then we issue an RFP, which kicks off the second proposal or the second phase of the hiring process. And then the firm develops the proposal, submits the proposal, the TRC scores the proposal. And then after the TRC scores the proposal, that's when we have the in-person interviews. And then the TRC will score the interviews. And then that's after the interview scores are complete, then we would have the firm submit the cost proposal. And then between the technical score produced by the proposal and the interview, and then the cost proposal is where we would get our best value calculation. And then we would have a commission award after the best values calculation. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Okay, yeah, I got dry mouth. I needed a cup this morning here. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the elements of a good, thank you. Elements of a good SOQ proposal and interview. This is where I really want to spend not a lot of time on because we do need to keep moving here. And, but this is an area I think that's hugely important to you guys, the consultants and the contractors online. So real quickly, the SOQ and technical proposal is the first step. And I want to mention that the technical proposal score is actually the combination of the written proposal and the interview. So we combine those two. Brandon mentioned by administrative rule, we have to be at 51% or more. We are leaning at this point, we've talked to MCA and we're leaning towards 1/3 technical, 2/3 interview. We get a lot of value out of that interview. So don't neglect the proposal, but definitely spend some time thinking about who you want to bring to your interviews. We'll talk about that here in a bit. So first off, statement of qualifications. It's the parts of the SOQ or the transmittal letter generally not scored. The team and key members, we're weighting that at 50% and related projects at 50%. Recently, we made a decision to steer away from providing an understanding and approach for pre-qualification simply because you're going to have to, we don't necessarily think it provides as much value as the team members and your experience. So we want to know who we're working with. So that's why we put so much weight on the team members. And then, but there may be some projects where we tailor for, that may be tailored for, hey, we want to hear how your project understanding and approach is going to be conducted. And then we'll shortlist up the 3 firms Shortly after that, we'll go ahead, or immediately after that, we'll send out our proposals, requests for proposals to the shortlisted firms. And then immediately after that, we will have our pre-proposal meeting with the Progressive Design Build teams. Statement of qualifications, parts, staffing. We talked a little bit about this. There's going to be some repetition from an earlier slide, but staffing, when you're putting together your SOQ, look at use of tables, org charts, staff interface, how they interface with one another on your org chart. Don't get too fancy. That's a common mistake. Very hard to read. I mean, you got to understand, people really want to keep it simple, basically is what it boils down to. What are their contributions to the project? Of course, that goes without saying. What are they going to provide to the project? Follow the RFQ and RFP. I say this two or three times. Follow the format of the RFQ and the RFP. Don't mix it up, change things, put sections and different things in different sections simply because we don't score them accordingly. We might give you partial credit, but that's about it. We want to see it. If we are asking for certain information in a section, then by all means follow it. Draw off of similar experience, that goes without saying. And before I go too much further, I want to make sure that everybody understands, especially our consultants, that PDD experience is not mandatory. We do not require it. It's helpful. There's no doubt about that. But really, we want experience. You show experience of how you've helped other agencies, other clients, and you've worked with stakeholders and engineers to come up with the final product. Photos, matrices, graphics, use them wisely. Don't just slap. I've seen this many times and it's almost annoying. You see a picture on there of something and you have nothing tying to it. None of your discussion ties to that photo or that graphic. It's kind of like a waste of space in our opinion. We talked a little bit about, and this is some overlap, but work from an outline. That's a no-brainer. Everybody should be. We really look past being wordy. We don't like real wordy introductions. I mean, really just get to the facts. I mean, you're going to be scored accordingly. We're not looking for fancy graphics. We're not looking for anything. As long as it's, I mean, I'd rather see a good, straightforward presentation. These are just my feeling, but I just rather see, just get to the facts. If you have to use bullets to prove something as opposed to a lot of text, because we don't really want to read a lot of text. We have a lot of proposals to read. So yeah, just stick with the facts. Matrices can be useful. That goes without saying. Be consistent within and across proposal sections. So if you say something about a person in one section in your project team and you show project experience, make sure that there is a connectivity between those two write-ups. Pick good projects. Basically, if you're going to show projects, and tie it to your team as your related experience. Tie it to your team. This section where, again, there's going to be on the weighting, it's going to be anywhere from 10 to 25%. That really just depends on the project. So we're going to use some flexibility there. The strategic approach for proposal section 2 is, again, follow the RFP layout. Keep repeating myself there, but that seems to be a common mistake. Here's what is important to MDT. Find the silver bullet. This is what consultants do a lot. Successful consultants will find out what keeps us up at night, what we want, what we're looking for, and work on that. It's risky. You have to be careful with it. If you're off on the wrong footing and it's not important to us, let's say a certain element of schedule is important to us, you assume that, well, it may not be, but regardless, make sure you understand what makes us tick. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Tables and graphics can be useful. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. Clearly address the project goals and the challenges. Really, in good proposals, good proposers will list a challenge. They will identify how they're going to approach that challenge, resolve that. And if you really want to put put a candle on top, go ahead and actually identify where you've done it in the past. So that impresses the reviewers. They're going to go, wow, these people know what they're talking about and they've done it. So don't just talk about the challenges. Don't be generic in your responses. It's helpful to illustrate you've done this before. I mentioned that. Tie approaches to design milestones. I'm kind of zipping through this. This is going to be available and we're available to talk about it. But how are you going to manage risk and innovations? Huge, huge, huge. How are you going to do that? That's a big part of actually us getting to a solid scope, schedule, and budget. And be creative with ideas. Don't limit yourself. If you're, don't limit yourself to what you think is important. Again, it kind of ties to the silver bullet. Recognize that some people may not see something as important as you do. So try to, when you're visiting with your peers, have them look at it and say, I don't really think I agree with that. And so anyway, and discuss collaboration with MDT, the consultant, and ICE. I've seen where some proposals, CMGC especially, they really don't tie it to the consultant. They don't tie their discussion with the ICE. How are you going to work with those folks? How is it going to, that's important. It's really, really important to us because we got to hit the ground running on these projects. Let's see, consider how you will address construction phase packages. We don't call them early work packages. We don't even call them component packages. With PDB, we call them construction phase packages. But, if you're planning on, if you think that there's going to be some low hanging fruit issues or deliverables, let's say you're doing a bridge bundling project and you can knock out 3 bridges right off the bat, easy peasy bridges, then go for it. Those are the ones we're looking for. We're looking for that type of thinking. Can you provide value added services or tools to the strategic approach? Don't neglect safety. Safety is huge, and there's, especially from our construction folks, they want to see how your design or how you have approached the use of optimizing the safe work zone. That I can't overemphasize that enough. There's been some projects where we've really been impressed. We've gone out in the field, seen projects, and quite frankly, you want to impress the director or the deputy director and go ahead and have a safe work zone. We want to know how you're going to manage quality. Typical cross sections, graphics, designs are valuable if done right. I mean, use them and don't just throw things out there on your proposals. We will weight is approximately 40% of the written proposal. Approach to section 3 is approach to progressive design build delivery process. You'll notice collaboration, decisions, risk, and address those 3 main project requirements: collaboration, risk, and decisions, how decisions are made. Clearly convey specific benefits of key staff. Tie your, what are the benefits of Bob or Sue, whatever, just basically convey that benefit of those people. It's also helpful to have, in that last slide, that last bullet, it's also helpful to have value-added folks. So if you have someone who's extremely well-versed in aesthetics, then bring that person to the table, even though you think that it's going to be a benefit and that, this person can be counted on to provide an aesthetically pleasing facility, then by all means, if you think it fits. How will you reduce cost and management risk? Brandon's going to talk a little bit about the risk, but essentially, how are you going to do that? Describe how we call it construction manager in a sense, that's a CMGC term, but in a sense, your contractors are serving as the construction manager on this project. They're basically there to assist the consultants. Remember, you're part of a multidisciplinary team, and this is weighted about 30% of the proposal. Section 5, innovations and resources. Be creative and open-minded. I mentioned that before. Generate a metric for gauging the impact. So tell us if you have an innovation, tell us where it's going to benefit us. Is it going to benefit us in fewer calls to the director or the district administrator? If it's going to improve safety, if it's going to be a cost benefit, let us know what the benefits are. Provide examples and outcomes if possible. I kind of keep hitting on that. How's your team structured to brainstorm, evaluate, and track innovations? Are innovations right for the site and conditions? So if you're a small contractor and you put out an innovation that requires a huge team, then you need to make sure that you cover, well, we're going to bring someone on staff to help us deliver that innovation. Is it right for the site? And finally, this section is weighted generally about 20% of the written proposal. Elements of a good interview. Actually, this looks a lot like me when I was about 6 years old, but I was this little skinny thing, but glossophobia. Glossophobia is actually 75% of the population suffers from this extreme fear to get out in front of folks. The reason I bring this up is because don't be afraid. I mean, you really need to put your effort into that. Know the interview format. Now that kind of goes without saying. No, and we're going to talk a little bit about the format here in a bit. Be relaxed, practice. I've talked to contractors who've done really well, and they put a great deal of energy, even though they may not know the questions in advance, they're still going to be comfortable walking into that interview. And they're going to be able to adjust on the fly, but practicing and getting rid of those jitters is important. And we expect it. I mean, everybody's jittery when they're presenting, but it is what it is. And we look past that. You'll be our partner. Start with this interview. It's like I say, the interview is 2/3 of the score for our next project, which Cody's going to be talking about. And we want to know who we're working with. So we want you to bring your subject matter experts, your project leaders. We don't want to see the vice president out of Omaha. We don't want to see that. It's just, that doesn't impress us. It's not going to really gain you any points. Avoid one person dominating discussion. I've had an interview where one person pretty much dominated everything, and really you need to have clean handoffs. And don't interrupt, show respect, let someone talk through it. Because we see that and we go, there's something wrong with this group. We see them not doing clean handoffs and allow that person to say what they need to say. I'm listening to your body language, like right now, I'm just tapping my foot. I always do that. It's a bad habit. But anyway, be cognizant of that, or where your hands are at. Just need to be personal. Anyway, let's see, be intentional with graphics, figures. We do allow you to do those. We've had people bring figures and graphics in that they didn't even use them. And it's like they handed it to us and we're going, what good is this? We want you to talk to those graphics. Consider value-added participants. I mentioned that before. The interview the format's going to be, 6 to 8 questions we'll give you before the presentation. We're leaning on 30 minutes for you to provide in private to prepare your responses and figure out who's going to respond to the questions. We'll allow you 15 minutes to do an introduction. You can use visuals, you can use flip charts, you can use screen. Recognize too that these interviews are in person. Now that we're pretty much out of COVID, we want to see you. We want to see you across the table within reason. Next slide. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Talked about the introductions. You have 45 to 60 minutes to respond to MDT's questions. MDT team is 15 minutes, and then we'll have a 15-minute Q&A session. Recognize at 15 minutes, like the third bullet down, we're going to cut you off. We're basically going to say you're done because we need to move on to that next section. And when your presentation is over, responding to questions, we're going to say you're done. If you miss a question, you just got to watch. You got to manage your time. 15-minute Q&A. Limited, and so our participants, we've asked our leadership to allow the TRC members to be in the meeting. We don't want to create an unbalanced or uncomfortable audience for you. We want you guys to be comfortable with the technical review members, and they'll be taking notes. Room setup. Understand that it's either going to be in the commission chamber or an auditorium. We'll and be familiar with the layout. But we'll have a place for you across the room. Confidentiality, we treat that very importantly. We will not share any of your technical proposal or interview information to anybody. The technical review committee signs an agreement, basically, a confidentiality agreement. So let's see, roles and responsibilities. This is also one of mine. I will hit on those pretty quick. How am I doing for time?
A little bit behind the program.
Okay, sounds good. So we have several members. Now, I mentioned ACGEC before. That happens to be our Dowell team. There will be times when we are so busy, we may have to assign a project leader, and that would be the person who is basically responsible for delivering that project. We will, over them though, we will have a project monitor, similar to the CEI services we're doing now. We'll have a project monitor who is basically responsible to report to management, and but anyway, we'll have a project leader. We want to know who your project PDB team principal, project principal is. It's usually probably going to be someone from the contractor. Contract project manager, and this might be the person, this might be a superintendent, but basically it's going to be who is our contact, our main point of contact as project manager from the contractor. We want to know who the design engineer is on your team, the lead person. Independent cost estimator, we will assign that. We have 3 term consultants that we pick from. We go through a process of selecting them for the project based upon the type of project it is. MDT functional managers, we're for our folks, there's a lot of folks here from MDT. We are not Xing you out of your duties, your responsibilities. Bridge might be, even though we might have a GEC serving to assist in Bridge, ultimately our functional managers are responsible. So Bridge, Geotech, you name it, all the different disciplines, those folks are involved in the process, and especially design development. Okay. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about the engineers' role in pre-construction and construction. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with the engineers because they've been down this road. I'm going to spend a lot more time for the contractors, talking about what we expect from them. So we want early data collection investigations, like pre-phase 1 type services. That's what you will be collecting. We need that as quickly as possible. So if you have to go out there and survey wetlands or do some preliminary geotech, if that's important to the project, we want you to have a plan to collect that information ASAP. Possibly we might provide that to you, but we're limited in our resources. The engineer will facilitate the design development meetings. And I use the term, you guys are driving the bus. I mean, in the design phase, even though you work for the contractor, you are still driving the bus. We're looking to you to come and basically manage the development of solutions with input from the contractor and MDT's functional managers. We'll have those meetings on a bi-weekly basis, possibly weekly, could be monthly. Depends on what the issues are and where we're at in the process. But right now we're leaning towards bi-weekly regular meetings. Project options analysis is provide options analysis as necessary. Basically that last slide bullet, we want you to be able to, if the contractor says, hey, I want to look at, an example is Johnson Lane, CMGC project. We were leaning toward raising the interstate, and the contractor challenged us and said, hey, why don't you lower Johnson Lane? And we said, I can't do that because there's too much utilities. And they said, we guarantee you that the cost of raising is going to be higher than the cost of lowering utilities in the road. And it turned out we saved a couple $1 million with that innovation. So we want you to be able to, you need to be able to collaborate with your MDT functional managers. We want you to have your functional manager and our functional manager have a clear line of communication. And that's, again, a lot of that is done through the bi-weekly meetings. The engineer of record, on potential design conflicts. Brandon's going to talk a little bit about that here pretty quickly. We're going along, but how that works, assist with prep of estimates, risk, innovation tasks. So you'll be assisting us. And again, I mentioned you're driving the bus. So lastly, and you're supporting that contractor during construction, just like you do now under design bid build. Design contract related construction, how are we doing for time? A little bit behind. Okay, a little bit behind. So anyway, assist agency engineer with design solutions. That's in the design phase. This is for the contractors. That's what you're there. You're at the table to help us, to share your experiences and your thoughts and ideas. We want you to be involved in the formal design reviews. I mean, you need to review what your contractor, your engineer is preparing. Constructability reviews, we like to see those. That's a deliverable. Market research, cost analysis for design decisions. So we want you to be able to go out there like the whole Johnson Lane issue. We want you to be able to go out there and figure out, okay, which is the cheapest and least impactful design solution. You're going to help us shape that project scope of work, and options analysis and innovation development is part of your responsibility. Under scheduled related services, you're going to review MDT's agency and ICE design schedules. So we're going to work with you and your consultant on coming up with the design schedule, not to be confused with construction schedule. You're going to prepare a detailed construction schedule in parallel with our independent cost estimator. So we want to make sure that if we think it could be done in 2 seasons and you think it could be done in 3 seasons, then we need to meet in the middle. We need to find out what's reality. I mean, what are your constraints, and try to work through those. We're still a team. We're not adversaries. We're a team. Develop construction phasing strategy. That goes without saying. Recommend schedule design development meetings. So basically, we're going to ask you to participate in those design development meetings and say, hey, I need to know about the geotech. I need to know more about. So I'm going to send my engineer out there, or ask NDT to provide data related to a site. That could be an example. And you're constantly analyzing schedule for risk impacts. Analyze risk register for potentials. I think that might be your last one. So I hate when that happens in my presentations. Cost related to construction services. Going to coordinate with MDT and the engineer regarding bid items. Basically this is going to follow CMGC format to where we're actually going to have standard bid items. We're going to be using it. Unlike design build, which we have schedule of values, which they're not necessarily the same. You're going to follow our standard format. Basically, we're doing production-based estimating, construction estimates. We don't, in this case, the engineer and the contractor are one. So essentially, you're going to provide a production-based construction estimate for the project, and our ICE is going to be reviewing those estimates. Assist with life cycle cost analysis, cost of design options, material cost forecasting. Are you expecting steel to go up? Are you expecting things to not be available? We want you to be able to to look into that and determine if we're going to have a problem getting beams delivered to the site. Determine cost and probability of risk items. We manage a risk register. Brandon's going to talk about it. So this under administrative related pre-construction services. You're going to coordinate. You're basically a responsible contractor to coordinate the contract documents. You represent your team, your consultant, and your subcontractors. Sometimes we want to have you assist in third-party stakeholder coordination. We might have you if we're working with a tribe, we're working with county, someone who has interest in the project. You're going to be involved in that, or can be. Assist with public relations, attend public meetings. You're going to manage subcontractor bid packages, study labor conditions, and you will be involved with partnering. Are we setting up partnering? We're setting up the partnering. So MDT will manage that, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah, MDT will generally manage the partnering, but you're going to be part of that partnering process. So decision-making process. breathe now. So.
So first off, some challenges with progressive design build decision making. One of the things that we saw with early on with CMGC was there's more parties involved. We've got the ICE there, we've got the contractor there. They've got to have some weight in the decisions that are being made. So, you know, how are we going to accommodate them in the decision-making process? They also come in with some different goals and perspectives. One of the things that John just talked about, partnering is very important for planning, laying out your goals and making sure they align. If they don't, talking about why they don't align and developing some project goals. The design is on an expedited schedule. It feels like everybody's on this bus and you're going a million miles an hour when you're trying to make decisions. So it feels fairly forced sometimes, which can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing, but we are on an expedited schedule. The contractors wanted to get out there and get the project complete. We, as MDT, also want the project to get complete, as well as I'm sure the stakeholders as well. And then this one, I try to phrase it some way that it doesn't look bad, but it is a challenge that I see. Is MDT has got more control of design than typical design build. In an RFP, we will typically write performance specifications, not prescriptive specifications, and the firm has got to develop solutions within that little box of performance specifications, and that's for design build projects. And then they describe that in their technical proposal, and they bid that solution in their technical proposal. If we want to change that solution after awarding the project, you would have to enter into some type of change order, very likely, if it's going to change the cost, which it most likely will. Change the cost. In this case, in progressive design build, as we're working from 30% to 60% to potentially 90% or even 100%, if we go that far in the process, MDT is going to have more control of design than we would see in a typical design build project. And so one of the things that we saw, as I mentioned earlier, we had more parties involved in CMGC. We had to implement a decision flow chart, and we've got. So this flow chart, it looks kind of nasty, but it's fairly simple. So there's some critical at the very bottom, that blue cloud, critical alternatives and options. Somebody mentioned something that might be an alternative, and then it starts to grow legs and say, hey, this is a real alternative. Every single decision doesn't have to go through this. Typically, we see it if we have conflicts, is when we use this kind of escalation type ladder for making big decisions on a project. If two people are seeing things completely differently, we would set up targeted specific meetings for this first level recommendation committee, which is that big design team, green bar at the bottom. There's several people that are involved in that. One good example of why we have the contractor and engineer and consultant in these in CMGC is if the contractor can't build something, they need to speak up and say, hey, this isn't buildable. If the engineer or if the contractor is pushing something that is bending or breaking standards, engineering standards, that's where the consultant's got to have a say. And then there's several people from MDT as well that are going to be involved in that first level recommendation committee. And as well on the right side, kind of that drop down green box there, that's for specific issues. If we've got wildlife issues like we have on MT200 bridges, we'd have potentially hydraulics, traffic and safety, and environmental in that decision. If it is truly just a bridge type decision, then we'd have bridge as well in that design, in that first level recommendation committee. If we can come to consensus on a alternative, we can make a decision as a first level committee. If we can't come to consensus, if there's one people that says I cannot support this alternative, that's where it gets kicked up to the second level, and really it's just a step of different management. So on the second level, engineer record, DA, program funding manager, and then bureau chiefs. And then third level, if the second level can't make a decision on something, then it goes up to the chief engineer to make a decision. One example, kind of hit this one really quickly. Johnson Lane Interchange, the contractor had challenges in the middle of this diverging diamond interchange. It's a 96-foot center median there. The contractor reviewed our 30% design and said, hey, we see these medians being a lot smaller. Why are you guys have a 96-foot median in there? So we kicked it over to Dowell. They produced a solution that was more in line with what the contractor had seen on a past project, which was more like a 37-foot median, which was about a third of the size of the one that we had before. And then at that point, traffic and safety was concerned about that 40-degree inflection angle there of the interchange or of the intersections. They were worried that people were going to turn right as if it was a normal roadway and then be in oncoming traffic. And so we ended up developing a solution that was somewhere in the middle. It was a 45-degree, 67-foot, so it reduced the overall size and footprint of the interchange. And it was a solution that everybody was happy with and everybody could get behind. And really, it's a, oops. I had something pop up there, but really, it's a balance of cost, function, safety, schedule as well. Everybody's bringing all these perspectives in, goals in, and it's a balance between all of them to come to an agreeable solution. So now we're on to risk identification and management. This is going to follow, I believe, CMGC to some degree. And then at the end of my slides here, I'll kind of highlight the differences that we are going to see from our different alternative delivery methods for progressive design build. So why do we do risk management? Contractual misallocation of risk has been found to be the leading cause of construction disputes in the U.S. And in general, project risks are on the rise. Increased traffic volumes, need to minimize traffic disruptions, more stringent environmental, community, and safety requirements, and the last one being something that we've been dealing with. I think everybody's been dealing with over the past 3 years: material costs, availability, lead times. And then who's involved in risk management? Everybody is. The owner, the engineer, the contractor, and the ICE all actively participate in the risk management process. So what does the risk management process look like? It's a detailed effort that encompasses all phases and aspects of the project. The goal is to keep the risk management process as tangible and scientific as possible. And then there's varying levels of risk management. There's Federal Highways has got their own tool. I'm sure other people have a lot of different tools. MDT is currently using a simplified approach, which I'll show on the next slide. It's really just a spreadsheet. And I think the simplified approach is something to appreciate because it should be a standalone document that you can hand to somebody and say, this is our risk register, and they should be able to go through it and have a good understanding of the risks that we're trying to manage on the project and also the risks that are concerning to the project at that certain milestone. So again, I say it's simple, and then there's this nasty spreadsheet with a bunch of stuff on it. Really, each row here is a identified risk, and then the different columns have their own specific headers on them. And we'll go through, I believe this was taken from the Trout Creek project, but it should simplify over time as you manage risks through a project. Those orange lines are the monitor, is the top one. The bottom one is the closed one. So as you go through the 30% should be a lot of risk identification. 60% you should start to turn the corner and be able to start managing a bunch of those risks through design. And then as you get to 90%, 100%, you should really focus on how do we manage or how do we mitigate these risks and close out these risks so we're not carrying costs for those risks through the bid price proposal and construction. So on identification, just an example of what a risk statement might look like. Structural steel repairs are more extensive than anticipated. This is something that typically the contractor would develop as a risk. And then the cause or the impact of that risk would be construction time is extended and repair costs are increased. So we put this into the risk register and then we assess it and analyze it. We determine the probability and impact of risk. This is one thing that I probably struggle with the most on is developing a risk probability. We've got to have some input from the contractor on this one, as well as the risk impact. Utilizing the probability impact to determine the risking or resulting risk score. And then this score can help prioritize risk mitigation efforts. So in this example, down at the bottom here, we've got risk probability. We do 0 to 5. And for this particular risk, we determined it to be a probability of 2. And then the risk impact is high, so it's a 5. And multiplying those together, it gives us a risk score. And so 10 is moderate. If we had a risk probability that was at 5, it's going to, and a risk impact of 5, that's going to generate a 25 risk score, and in our spreadsheet, we'd be able to identify that and say, hey, this is a risk that we really need to pay attention to, develop some mitigation strategies for, and figure out how to mitigate it. And then another thing that we also discuss here, I'll reference back to in a couple slides, is who's best suited to manage this risk. Is this something that MET should manage, or the contractors should manage, or it should be shared? Develop a mitigation plan to better determine condition of existing structural steel, perform additional site investigation and testing, or define an allowance to cover the cost if this risk should occur. So for the first one, we may say one good example of this is like the Johnson Lane interchange. We have a risk of having a bunch of additional muck excavation out there. We don't think it's necessary to go out there, have the consultant go out there and core a bunch of holes and figure out a better quantity for muck excavation. So we are in return carrying an MDT contingency item that if our planned quantity is overrun by a certain amount, we would pay this amount, and that is documented through a special provision. And really that's called a contingent or a provisional sum. And so in this case, MDT owns this contingency. The amount should be documented as well. How do we get to that 125,000 for these structural steel repairs? Well, the crew's going to be working, say, 3 extra weeks. They've got a crew of X amount of people. That's how these $125,000 are generated. And then that's going to be put into a special provision on when to pay for this additional work. And then also monitor and implement, and then measure and control the last two items we talk about. Example, risk follow-up, continue to elevate and update risk assessment and mitigation plan throughout the life of the project, design and construction. In the case of the steel deck repairs or the steel repairs on the deck, we've got deck pouring and top flange inspection. So if we actually go out there and do some inspection and we say, hey, this is actually a big issue, we need to either increase the risk bucket or the probability, or hey, we didn't see the concerns out there that we thought we might have. So we're going to lower our probability of having some additional deck repairs or steel repairs. And then continue to update and revise contingency cost estimates. Again, updated material pricing, sometimes between 30 and 60%. There might be 6 months or a year between them. Materials can fluctuate a lot between those. And then detail a plan for steel rehab replacement documented in the special provision for this particular example. So how is risk management different? Traditional design build, most of the risk is transferred to the firm, and there's not a lot of discussion. There is some discussion prior to or when we're scoping the project about risk and really how we're going to be transferring that onto the firm. After the project is awarded, we typically don't discuss risk that much. In traditional design build, in CMGC, risk is shared and mostly should be mitigated, and that is because we're taking the plans to PS&E or 100% plans, and so we have opportunity to, if there are any risks that we can mitigate through design, we can take it to that 100% design milestone, and it should be mitigated. PDB, risk is shared, but the final bid price could be established before final design. So this is where if we establish a bid price at 60% design milestone, we have to have more focus on risk management earlier in the design process, and that's going to be between the owner, the contractor, and the ICE. So I think I went a little bit over there, but I'm going to hand it over to Cody to talk about cost. Take it away, Cody.
Thanks, Brendan. I want to move here. So let's talk about estimating what the procedure looks like. So get into milestones, how the activities are, each of those milestones, talk a little bit about the independent cost estimator, and we'll just briefly touch on production-based estimating. So the milestones are pretty typical based on all the standard MDT milestones. So basically you start off with a 10 to 30% rough order of magnitude. You go to alignment grade at 30%. But where it gets interesting is at 60 to 90%. Basically, if the bid price is basically agreed to, the risks have been mitigated and assigned and so forth, MET can elect and the contractor design build firm can move forward to essentially provide a bid price proposal that could ultimately be awarded to the firm to move forward. So that's where it gets a little more interesting compared to like CMGC, like Brandon had mentioned. Let's quickly run through the estimate activities. So initially there's a constructability review, which is basically a look at the plan set. This is pretty typical, each milestone. This is an opportunity to basically refine the design in each milestone. So if there's little odds and ends within that plan set package that needs to be tweaked or other risks that could be mitigated, this is an opportunity to do so before we go into the estimating procedure. Think of it just sort of as a refinement. The next step is the approach to price. Basically, this is a meeting to discuss how the firm views the work and how the ICE views the work, so that everybody's on the same page moving forward on how they're going to work through their estimates. This also helps everybody get in alignment on how they're going to set up their estimates with their indirect costs, where they're going to carry risks, contingencies, all that, and basically share that information with each other to make sure that going into the actual estimate reconciliation, everybody's thinking about it similarly, so that we can have a constructive review of the cost estimates. At that point, the estimates are submitted. They go to MDT, and so basically that begins the process of comparing those estimates. The idea here is that moving forward, MDT is probably going to have open book estimating so that everybody's aware and accountable of how they arrive at a certain number within the estimate. That'll help for more constructive dialogue back and forth between the ICE team and the PDB firm. So there's a pre-estimate reconciliation meeting, which is basically the first look comparison of the spreadsheets, taking a look at various work group items to see which ones have significant variances or ones that are basically close enough that they don't need to be discussed much further. At that point, if there are some wild discrepancies or things that are misunderstood that need to be updated or revised, those estimates can then be revised at this point before they're submitted again to actually go into the estimate reconciliation process. Again, I mentioned the open book pricing. This is a new thing, but this does help with everybody being accountable and being able to really talk through all the specifics. Just so this is a great example of what that looks like. You can see that some of these items on the right are highlighted in red and yellow, and that means that there's variances that are significant enough that they need to be discussed further. And so at the estimate reconciliation meeting, those are the topics that will rise to the top, where we'll spend more time digging into how you arrived at production rates, or what your assumptions were for material sources or subcontractors or whatever it might be that's driving that cost up and creating that variance. And it goes both ways between the ICE and the firm. So depending on who's doing work one way or the other, there just needs to be some discussion on how to reconcile that. The post-reconciliation estimate is basically after all the discussion has happened and everybody's tuned up their estimates, we're ready to go ahead and move forward and submit those as final. And like I had mentioned earlier, Brandon also mentioned at the 60 and 90, for example, you can move forward if everybody agrees the bid price is reasonable and essentially discuss how to award a construction package. There's basically thresholds. So basically it's the variance between the ICE team and the PDB firm's estimates. If they're within 5%, that's considered acceptable, and MDT could elect to move forward to go ahead and award a project and accelerate a project. If it's 5 to 10%, then further discussion is necessary, and that ultimately would probably take it to another milestone to work that out. And if it's over the 10%, then that's considered unsuccessful and acceptable. Quickly talk about the ICE, the independent cost estimator. They're there to basically help foster a team environment. They are experts in their field. They're typically former contractors, estimators with a ton of experience. So they'll talk about fair market pricing, their experiences. Again, John mentioned they're selected based on the scope of work for the project. So they have recent relevant experience in their careers. They're innovative. They bring good ideas. They also work on an independent schedule to check the contractor PDB firm schedule. We're just there to be helpful all in all with the project. Quickly just show you a production-based estimating form here. Again, I discussed the fact that it's based on equipment, it's based on production rates, it's based on your labor force. We're going to talk about what you're even paying people. We're going to talk about your per diem, all these things that roll into, your directs, indirects, and how that ultimately ripples into the cost of the project.
Okay, we're wrapping up here, promise. So real quickly, go through the guidance document. This is what basically we've done, we took the CMDC guidance doc as our template and we worked from there. We follow the format. First thing is we have to have federal FHWA approval for a standalone guidance doc. We're going to be submitting that to, we've been with Gene Cochran and his folks over at, Federal Highways. We had a lot of, in CMGC, we had a pre-construction markup for contractors, labor of 1.5 times their labor rates. And that was account for overhead and profit and, overhead and profit essentially. We talked to some contractors and we talked to our ICEs and they all think that that's a little bit low. So we raised that from 1.5 to 1.8. Again, that's for their pre-construction markup. Their construction mark, basically they follow their normal construction estimating process. We have established, this is important to the consultant crowd, we're going to pay the consultants the same way we're paying you now for your design bid build work. We're going to be either doing either cost plus fixed fee, or in some cases, we may go with a negotiated rate, but a fully loaded rate. We basically want to get the contractor and you paid for every hour that you're working on something. Essentially, we assume that there's not going to be any wasted effort in an expedited delivery. Modified bid price proposal, we talked a little bit about that. We had a threshold of 10%. If you're under 10% of over the ice and with CMGC, then that was an acceptable cost. We've kind of tightened that down. The national average is anywhere from 2 to 3% over the ice. If the project's done right, if we're collaborating and we're working together, we should be within that threshold of 5%. So anything under 5%, we will generally award. Anything between 5 and 10%, it's a discretionary decision on our part. And anything over 10%, then we have to hit what's called the off-ramp. But essentially, that means that the contractor is not going to be building the project. The contractor has too much at stake, they're going to work with us. That's generally, nationally, that's basically how it works. We want to target scope, price, and schedule certainty at plan in hand. So we can use the full benefits of progressive design build, which means that essentially we're doing a phase one, and then we agree on that price, and we have price certainty, we're within the threshold, then we hit the gas. Essentially, you guys then treat it like a design build project. You're following a design build flow chart. You go immediately to 90%, 100%. Now we have all the certs, everything, all the environmental docs, everything needs to follow our standard process. But essentially, that's the beauty, and that's one of the big benefits of progressive design build. I mentioned that. We're going to allow the contractor flexibility in their payment methods. With CMGC, we only have a unit price. With progressive design build, we are based on the project. We're going to determine this early, MDT. Either unit price, lump sum, cost plus fixed fee, a consultant term, but basically the same principle, and a guaranteed maximum price. So I think y'all understand that, GMP is a term that we use. You can bill up to that, and after that, no more billing. Essentially I'm thinking that we're probably going to be in the unit price category, but it is going to be project specific. Brandon talked about the design decision process. These are all, and the RFQ and the RFP are included in the project specific requirements. We're not going to address every single situation in the progressive design build guidance doc. There are things that are going to be outlined in the RFP or the RFQ. Future of alternative contracting, MDT's vision is we recently had Senate Bill 57 pass that gave us the ability to utilize any alternative delivery method approved by the feds. So that includes CMGC, progressive design build. Ever increasing infrastructure, our bridges are falling down. I mean, we're in trouble. So we need to address that. We need to have a healthy balance between design bid build, alternative contracting methods. Our resources are leaving us. I mean, we just don't have the manpower, the labor. That's why we hired the CGEC to assist us in delivering our program, especially when the director promises the governor that we're going to go to 40%. So anyway, but no, we need it. We need help. We talked a little bit about the ACGEC. I think we covered their role pretty extensively. The goal right now is 25%. That is what I've been told. It might go over that, and I have no idea when that's gonna happen, but it's probably gonna happen sooner than later. Sure, let's
Kept everybody for an hour and a half, might as well talk about the first project.
and we're gonna go long, folks. I apologize for that.
So the Defense Access Road Structures Lewistown Area Project is the first progressive design build that's gonna be coming out. Basically, it's 11 structures, that need to be replaced on MT 81 in that vicinity. So that's north of Lewistown. This is real similar, work to some of the other bridge bundling projects that have been ongoing in DT. There was a little infusion of funds from the Department of Defense, so that's helping move the project along. Of course, there'll be wildlife combination and staging challenges and all those sorts of things that come along with bridge bundling. So that will be fun. It's about a $25 to $30 million estimate at this point. And we will have a heavy role. The Dowell team and Garver will be assisting on the MDT owner side. Looking forward to that. And projected advertising date is February of next year. So get ready.
And if folks are interested, Ellen Hinshaw is the PM, or in this case, it'll be the project manager. So we really got to get moving here. I apologize for the length of time. Really, by going with PDB, it reduces your project pursuit effort and costs. We're really gonna de-emphasize the need in the proposal, put more emphasis on the presentation. They're not cheap, but they're a lot cheaper than a design build effort. Local knowledge affects team selection. I mean, really, this is, if you understand what keeps us up at night, what makes us tick, and again, contractors, for the contractors around this call, your engineers are gonna know who we are, and they're gonna, essentially that's important, and that's gonna play hopefully into your proposal and into your selection. Say contractor engineer collaboration promotes efficiency, improved owner contractor collaboration. Collaboration we use a lot. Greatly improved risk management and reduced project costs. We want to expedite that scope and maximize the innovations through progressive design build. We talked about, shouldn't be early work packages, but basically similar to component packages. Early scope schedule and cost certainty, and finally, we provide you the option to go design build. And that is it. We will, at this point, take questions. I'm not monitoring the chat. Can you go ahead and bail out of the presentation? We'll see what we got out there. And I don't know if Steve's monitoring it or not. So hang on just for a sec. Let's see if there's any questions.
In the chat box yet.
What's that, Steve?
Nothing is in the chat box yet.
Oh, okay. Well, sounds like we did such a great job. You don't have any questions. Well, we'll just take verbal. If you have a question, you're online, go ahead and throw your hands up when you go to people out there. So see if anybody still. So we've lost a few people. We started out with 110. But any questions online?
I got one, John.
Okay, go ahead.
It said we shortlist 3 proposers. I'm just trying to recall them. So we are only going to shortlist 3 proposers for PDB.
Yeah.
And then,
Because there's no sense in if someone is out, we got a 4th or 5th, we're wasting contractors' money, the consultants' money. Why do we want to do that? So,
and we're going to do that in CMGC as well moving forward, or have we?
yeah, we need to decide that, but I'm thinking that's the way we're going to go. Actually, we are with.
Yeah, without
Post Creek.
stipends with PDB and
Yeah.
CMGC, we want to limit the
Yeah.
effort that contractors are putting in.
Yeah, we're just trying to be respectful of your time and effort. It takes a bundle of money to even do an interview. It takes a lot of time and effort. So we're trying to minimize that for people who really don't have a chance, to be honest with you. Anyway. Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns?
Hey, John, online, there's one question from Cody Thorson that says, can MDT move forward with a single response to the SOQ?
If there's only one response, can you move forward?
Yes, we can. We will have to, that allows us the ability to, we will have to modify our price component. We'll still have to have you, I mean, again, we've not had this happen yet, but we've been thinking about it. And our price component, it may be a negotiated price component or their overhead profit for construction. But, you know, as long as they submit a good SOQ and a proposal, and quite frankly, we're gonna go through the interview. I mean, we're not to just be mean, but just really we want to know who we're talking to. We want to know, I mean, we have the decision to basically bail as well. If we don't feel that this person is qualified, we're not just gonna automatically go to selection. So, yeah, we're hoping that doesn't happen. And we're being very mindful. We're reaching out to people. If we don't hear people are interested, then we're gonna reach out to people. The other thing we look at, we do a 3-month look ahead in our group. We look at projects coming out, try to figure out who might the engineers and who the contractors are on those projects and say, okay, we're doubling up on 2 ADA projects. Well, that's gonna take WGAM out or DJ&E or Morrison Merrily, whatever. You're gonna basically, they're gonna have to decide between 2 projects, and we don't want to do that. We want you to be able to go after that project, give you some breathing room, and then we'll try to take the project that's of least importance and push it out away. So we try to do that as best we can. Some projects, sometimes we just can't do that. So anyway.
One
Anything
more,
else?
one more question online, John. Will today's PowerPoint presentation be made available?
Yes, it'll be on our website along with the audio. And we'll post that probably in the next couple of days.
Is David Smith? Do you have audio, David?
I don't know if this one's-
Yes, I'm here.
There.
Hello.
I'm kind of looking to you as kind of the MCA representative. You and I were involved in this legislation. Do you think we've reached what we were hoping to?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a good start. I want to review it again and with some of the contractors, but I think, you know, I liked the comment that, you know, the people who are going to be doing the project should be the ones that are there for the interview, not the guy from Omaha, for example. So I think that's where we wanted to go.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry to single you out, but
Hey, I was still on board. How about that, huh? Still paying attention.
seeing
Nice-
you
nice-
out there. I want to
Nice
make
try.
sure.
Nice try.
You and I sat in the halls more than once up at the Capitol, and I want to make sure we can go again, because you and I know 2025, they're going to question us. Did we meet the legislative intent? Are we, as kind of the consulting, contracting, MDT community, meeting what they expected? So I'm looking to you to help make sure we can both answer shoulder to shoulder. Yep, we're working together.
Well, I like the flow chart of the trying to figure out what the best model is for each project. So I think that'll help a lot too.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
David, I have a follow-up question. If you guys, I didn't see a lot of contractors participating, mostly consultants and MDT folks. If you feel like you want us to repeat this, we can certainly do an online version. And it doesn't necessarily have to be all of us. One person could probably cover the whole thing or a couple of people, but regardless, if you guys feel like they would like some follow-ups or this presentation provided to them, be more than glad to offer that up.
So John, earlier in your presentation, you talked about some kind of Google phobia or something, fear of talking in front of people. Mac and I kind of suffer from that. Do you know where we can get some help with that?
I have a good counselor. You guys don't have any problem with that.
Which brings up the point, so everyone knows, today's was being recorded and transcribed, so there is a privacy policy. So everything we say can.
Can it will be
will
used
out-
against
and
you.
it will be out there for public consumption. Now I want to retract my joke. You can't,
Can't do it.
it's still depends.
It's out there now, Matt. Never mind.
We've gone a few minutes over. We appreciate your time and unless there's more, oh, another,
There's another question.
oh, yeah, keep going.
I'll just read it for the group.
Okay.
When you discussed the fee process earlier, it was mentioned about pricing within the set range as an example, if the fee was at the bottom of the range. And as an example, if the fee was at the bottom of the range, it would be maximum points and the top of the range, 0 points. How does that work? Will the range be published ahead of time?
Yeah, the range will be published ahead of time. We're still considering what the range should be and working with management to kind of make sure that the calculation makes sense. But the example I gave is that the low end of the range would be 10% for the construction phase multiplier and the high range would be 20% for the construction phase multiplier. And so it'd be just basically an interpolation between 10 and 20%. So if your team bid 15%, for example, you get half the points of the cost proposal section. If you bid 10%, you get the full points. And if you bid 20%, you get 0 points essentially. And so what we're trying to do with this is put some sort of cost pressure on this so that it doesn't allow teams to bid the full 20% because we are seeing that as, based on our past projects, we're seeing that as that to be kind of unreasonable. And with the old formula that we had for the closest to the average, teams are getting like 92% of the total points if they were bidding 20%, which was, and some teams were also scoring equally. If there was a team that was at 15 and a team that was at 10, and the closest to the average was 12.5, then both of those teams would get the same amount of cost proposal points, even though they're 5% difference, and MBT is going to pay 5% more for the project.
And that range will be detailed in the RFP.
Yeah, one of the other benefits of going away from the closest to average is that we only get 2 firms pre-qualified and we have a max range of 20%. There's nothing keeping them. I mean, nobody loses because you're both going to be closest to average. So you get all the points and you can also bid extremely high. So that doesn't really work well. So we've been talking about this for quite a while. Different states do different things. We feel like that interpolation method that Brandon has come up with, Brandon and Darren, it actually is probably one of the fairest. Doesn't, we don't cheat you out of your profit. We don't cheat you out of your overhead during construction. So we think it's about the fairest way to do it. So I don't know, Tony, if that answered your question. If you have any further questions, either type them in or we can even talk offline. It doesn't matter. But yeah, we wanted to clarify that. All right. Well, we've gone 13 over. Hate to go long in our presentations, but there's a lot we had like 79, 78 slides we covered pretty quickly. And there's just so much information. We could talk all day long in just one little area, risk management. We could spend a day talking about that. Anyway, we want to thank everyone for joining in. Those people who are here, who've actually took the time to show up and get a $100 gift certificate. No, stop the recording. See, it showed up.
It's on the record.
Well, thank you very much for attending, and I guess we can close out. If you have any further questions, don't be afraid to get a hold of Ellen, myself, Brandon, or Clancy. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good job.